this very weak, submissive president named Lenin Moreno. He was easily bullied and manipulated and intimidated by U.S. officials. The Ecuadorians announced they were withdrawing asylum, even though nothing had changed. They were withdrawing asylum. That's what enabled the London police to then go into the Ecuadorian embassy with the permission of Ecuador's government and arrest Julian Assange in 2019. So he was in this tiny little embassy without ever having the ability to even go outside. There was a tiny little balcony that he was afraid to go on because of fear of assassination, which everyone in the know mocked him for as well. The idea that anyone would want to assassinate Julian Assange was considered a preposterous conspiracy. Except 2 months ago, Yahoo News, led by Mike Isikoff and other experienced journalists, reported that the CIA throughout the Obama years was in fact plotting to do exactly that, to assassinate and even to kidnap or assassinate Julian Assange. But at the time, it was considered preposterous that he had this fear. So he never went outside. He was confined to a tiny one-bedroom apartment for 7 years. His mental health suffered. His physical health clearly suffered. They often didn't even allow in the doctors that he needed. And so the London police went in 2019, arrested him with the permission of the Ecuadorian government. And the only charge that was pending against him, there were no charges in Sweden ever brought. And in 2017, the Swedish investigators announced they were closing that case because of how much time had elapsed. So there were no charges in Sweden against Assange when he was arrested. The only charge that was pending that enabled the London police to arrest him in 2019 was a criminal charge for bail jumping, which is basically a misdemeanor. That was the only charge pending against him. It had a 1-year maximum prison term. He went to court. The bail jumping was for having not shown up at that extradition hearing back in 2012, instead seeking legal asylum. But to the British, that was a crime to seek legal asylum. He was sentenced to 50 weeks in prison. So just 2 weeks short of the maximum 1 year. He was put in a high security prison called Belmarsh Prison outside of London. In 2004, the BBC dubbed it Britain's Guantanamo Bay. It's a place where terrorist suspects are held by the United Kingdom. It's a high security, maximum security, repressive prison. He was there throughout the pandemic, even though his physical health was suffering. And he only had 50 weeks to serve. There were no other charges. And right as the 50 weeks was approaching and he was finally going to be freed, Julian Assange was finally going to be freed, the U.S. government unveiled an 18-count felony indictment accusing him of espionage based on his role in publishing those 2010 documents showing war crimes in Iraq, Afghanistan, and corruption by U.S. allies. The same documents that the New York Times, The Guardian, El País, and many, many other media outlets around the world had published. And the argument the U.S. government made was Julian went beyond what those other outlets did because he didn't just passively receive and then publish these top secret documents. He provided encouragement to his source and help on how she could evade detection. Now, that is an actually interesting thing. I said top secret documents. The reality was none of the documents that the WikiLeaks source, Chelsea Manning, took and then gave to in 2010 were top secret. They were all at the lowest level of classification because she was just an army private. She didn't have access to top secret documents. They were all just secret or marked classified, the lowest level of secrecy you can have. But they claim that he did what every investigative journalist does with their source, what I've done with my sources, which is encourage her to get more documents and to help her avoid getting caught, which is not only the right, but the duty of every journalist. But by doing that, the U.S. government created a theory that he became part of the crime of his source and charged him with 18 counts of espionage. And because of that, because when the U.S. charged him with those 18 counts, they also sought his extradition. And the U.S. government asked the British court to hold him in prison while their extradition request was being processed through the British court. So 7 years in detention in the Ecuadorian embassy, another year in a high security prison in the UK that still wasn't enough for the US government, even though he's practically broken by now. They unveiled this indictment, sought his extradition, demanded he remain in prison while the extradition is pending, and the British courts agreed to keep him in prison indefinitely until the extradition process is finalized. So all they really want with Julian Assange is to silence him, to make him disappear. However they can do that, they don't care. And so they're happy if he's in a British prison with all these charges pending. They don't care if he's convicted. They just want him in a cage, unable to do what he's always done, which is real reporting, real journalism, not the kind of shitty political gossip that Morning Joe does and that Politico and Huffington Post reporters get to go on Morning Joe to talk about, like who's hot and who's not, and not CIA stenography of the type that CNN and NBC do, and the New York Times and the Washington Post do, and then give them Pulitzers for, where they spread CIA lies about Russiagate or Russian bounties being put on the head of U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan, or all the other lies those media. Julian Assange does real journalism. He publishes the secrets that people in power don't actually want known because it reveals their corruption and criminality. He's a real journalist, a real dissident. That's why they want him in prison.